It's okay for you. And they're doing the wave reverse, reverse the root. And that's what's done too. You say duck watching? I can't get closer, so I have to bend way over. There you go. Cool. Light of bounce from it. Yeah, okay. Anyone else who don't got a haircut? Pretty official here, right? Mm-hmm. This is what was going on. Everybody was showing up here. They were hooking up their computers, doing stuff in that computer. Morning, Edmonton. Good morning, Foothills. Edmonton, there you go. Excellent. So, Stampede's coming up, and we're going to do announcements in a sec. It's coming up this Friday. Yeah, it's going to sneak up on us again. But I have found Bible verses for the Stampede event. Are you guys ready? So this is for the chuck wagon races. Some boast in chariots and some in horses, but we will boast in the name of the Lord our God. So that's, chuck wagon. These ones have nothing, they're just more general. For every beast of the forest is mine, the cattle on 1,000 hills. He, God, causes the grass to grow for the cattle, and vegetation for services of man, that he may bring forth food from the earth. And this one's really a saddle bronc event verse. In that day, says the Lord, I will strike every horse with confusion and his rider with madness. So those seem totally applicable to me. Right? You can say amen. There, thank you. So our announcements. Calgary Stampede Barbecue. You guys all ready for this? Who has not been to this Calgary Stampede barbecue before here at ours? One person, two people, that's it? Really, I thought it'd be more than that. Yeah. People there, well, Edmonton should come down. You know, we should do that. Anyway, well, it's almost here, our amazing annual Stampede barbecue. Dust off your cowboy boots and come on down this Friday, July 7th, for our annual Stampede barbecue. The event runs from 11 a.m. to 2 p.m., and I have been reading the notes. The band will be playing from 10:30. So we'll have music starting at 10:30. There will be our free beef on the bun. We do the best beef on the bun in the city that day by far. We hear it every year from everybody. So if you're invited to assist, so if there's people who still are looking to help out, Donna is always looking for people to do stuff. So, right, Donna? Help get you water? Okay. Anyway, if you're taking the day off and attending the parade with your family, feel free to bring them. I've invited a bunch of family. I know employment guys have invited a bunch of people from different people they work with in employment to help people get jobs, things like that. I forgot to say something, though. The aftercare team, where are they? They got 3 people's jobs already in the first week of July. Housed. No, you're going to house. 3 people housed. 3 already this month, right? Excellent. So they deserve a round of applause. The next week, we have the Shelter Stampede breakfast. Is July 13th. The shelter will be serving a free pancake breakfast. I see people are charging for these things now. I don't think those are Stampede breakfasts that you have to pay for them. We'll have live music and many family-friendly games. There's a bus leaving from downtown to the shelter at 9:30, and we'll return by noon for the downtown staff. Space is limited, but get on there. If not, grab a ride with Steve. He's happy to drive people to the shelter. That'll be great. Next week's speaker, and this was special request just by Steve. He said, Bill, if you're going to organize these things, there's one thing you've got to pull off. We have got to get Pastor Thiessen from the Cowboy Trail Church here for Stampede Week, and he's coming. So as it is Stampede time, we thought it was appropriate. He's actually called the Cowboy Pastor, and he does poetry for the most part, and he stands out. There's no question. And so he will be in here next week as part of our Stampede celebration, so that'll be great. This week's speaker, he just told me he has not actually preached since 1991. I thought he was much older than that, but anyway. He's our Chief Development Officer, Richard Deshane, so let's give Richard a round of applause.
Camera. Good morning, Edmonton. Good morning, Shelter. All right. Hope everyone's doing well. Let me read you a familiar story. There was a man who had 2 sons. The younger one said to his father, Father, give me my share of the estate. So he divided his property between them. Not long after that, the younger son got together all he had, set off for a distant country, there squandered his wealth and wild living. After he'd spent everything, there was a severe famine in that whole country, and he began to be in need. So he went and hired himself out to a citizen of that country who sent him out to the fields to feed pigs. He longed to fill his stomach with those pods that the pigs were eating, but no one gave him anything. When he came to his senses, he said, How many of my father's hired servants have food to spare, and here I am starving to death? I will set out and go back to my father and say to him, Father, I have sinned against heaven, I have sinned against you. I am no longer worthy to be called your son. Make me like one of your hired servants. So he got up and went to his father. But while he was still a way off, his father saw him and was filled with compassion for him. He ran out to his son, threw his arms around him, and he kissed him. The son said to him, Father, I have sinned against heaven, I have sinned against you. I am no longer worthy to be called your son. But the father said to his servants, Quick, bring the best robe and put it on him. Put a ring on his finger and sandals on his feet. Bring a fattened calf and kill it. Let's have a feast and celebrate. For this son of mine was dead, and he's alive again. He was lost, and he's found. So they began to celebrate. Meanwhile, the elder son was in the field. When he came near the house, he heard the music and the dancing, so he called one of his servants and asked him, What's going on? Your brother has come, he replied. Your father has killed the fattened calf because He has come back safe and sound." The older brother became angry and refused to go in, so the father went out and pleaded with him. But he answered his father, "Look, after all these years, I've been slaving for you and never disobeyed your orders. Yet you never even gave me a young goat so I could celebrate with my friends. But when this son of yours, who has squandered your property with prostitutes, come home, you kill the fattened calf for him." "My son," the father said, "you are always with me, and everything I have is yours. But we had to celebrate and be glad because the brother of yours was dead and he's alive again. He was lost, and now he's found." Let's take a moment to pray. Father, thank you for the words that you've given us through your Son, Jesus Christ. May they speak to us truth and illuminate the path that you would have us follow. Amen. Of course, we all know this as the parable of the prodigal son. Unfortunately, I think that title, it misses the mark. It's true, he was a prodigal, and some of you may know what the prodigal means. Most of us don't. It simply means a person who spends money in a reckless and extravagant way. Yes, the story is about a son, but it's about more. It's a very telling story of three primary characters: the younger son, the elder, and father. But the story is about something much deeper. It's about the condition of the human heart, the inclinations, the struggles and temptations that we all face. So perhaps the story is better titled The Parable of the Lost Sons and the Loving Father. To understand why Jesus is telling this story, we need some quick context here. Luke 15, verses 1 and 2, "Now the tax collectors and sinners were all gathering around to hear Jesus, but the Pharisees and teachers of the law muttered, 'This man welcomes sinners and eats with them.'" So Jesus uses three consecutive parables in chapter 15 to explain why he eats with sinners. This is the last of the parables, the longest and the most detailed of the three. Why parables? Because Jesus knows that parables are pictures that become mirrors and then windows into the heart. So the younger son, his work life is likely predictable. It's even humdrum. Tilling the soil, pruning the vines, gathering the fruit. It was the same thing day in, day out. And he hated it. He had a spirit that craved adventure. He thought he was dying inside. He needed something new. He likely heard about the cities from the businessmen his father did business with, and thought this would be perfect places for him to quench his restless spirit. So he did the cockiest thing he could possibly do. He asked his father for all of his share in the inheritance, all the cash he would get when his father was dead. He didn't think about how it would hurt his father. He only thought about his own perspective and how he felt he was hurting inside. He was leaving at any cost. In Jewish society, there were laws regarding the inheritances, how they were typically divided. The oldest brother got a double share. It's in Deuteronomy, while the other brothers got a single share. So in this case, there's two brothers. The older brother would get 2/3 of the estate. The younger brother would get 1/3 of everything. So before his father was dead, his father would still have use for these possessions, though. How many fathers would receive that suggestion well today? How many would comply with if one of their children asked for it? If your child asked for it? I can speak for myself, not me. I'm half Dutch. Which reminds me, what's the difference between a Dutchman and a canoe? Canoes tip. That's the truth. In all seriousness, this is a truly astonishing request, and would have been more astonishing in the ancient world. For in Jesus' audience, respect for the Father, it's paramount. The request for inheritance from a still healthy patriarch constitutes an unthinkable offense. It amounts to saying, I wish you were dead. I'm not sure about you, but I believe I am the prodigal son every time I search for the unconditional love where it can't be found. Why do I often keep ignoring the place of true love and persist on looking for it elsewhere? Why do I keep leaving home where I'm called the child of God, the beloved of my Father? I'm constantly surprised at how I keep taking gifts God has given me, my health, my intellectual and emotional gifts, and keep using them to impress people. Receive affirmation and praise instead of developing them for the glory of God. It's almost as if I want to prove myself and to my world that I don't need God's love. That I can make on my own. I want to be truly independent. Beneath that is a great rebellion. The radical no to the Father's love, the unspoken curse, I wish you were dead. The prodigal son's no reflects Adam's original sin, his rebellion, his rejection of God and those whose love we are created and by whose love we are truly sustained. If we're honest, we can all relate to the younger brother at some point in our life. Basically, we've said to God, I want what you can give me, but I don't want relationship with you. That's the first son, the prodigal, whose story we're all too familiar with. But what about the elder son? Here's an interesting parallel we don't likely see at first. Not only did the younger son, who left home to look for freedom and happiness in a distant country, get lost, but the one who stayed home also became a lost man. Exteriorly, he did all the things a good son is supposed to do, but interiorly, he wandered away from his father. He did his duty, worked hard every day, and fulfilled all of his obligations, but became increasingly unhappy and unfree. Timothy Keller points out that these two brothers represent the two basic ways people try to make life work. The younger son pursues self-discovery. He's on a quest to find and fulfill himself, even if a few people get hurt along the way. The older brother is committed to a more socially respectable way of being in the world, the way of moral conformity. He's on a program of self-salvation, earning approval from his community and the favor of his father. When he feels the terms of his deal are violated, his good attitude evaporates into resentment. If you're like me, we've played the rules much of our lives, but we begin to see that our good behavior has been, at least subconsciously, a form of self-salvation, an attempt to earn God's approval, maybe even obligate him to do what we want. When we consider the fact that Jesus told the story to the Pharisees, older brothers, if ever there were any, in response to their outrage over his association with sinners, we realize this parable is perhaps more about the father's relationship with the older son. When you read this story and are brutally honest with yourself, do you resonate with the older brother more than the younger brother? Let me ask you, when was the last time you felt really lost? As a male, admitting you're geographically lost, that's a whole different, separate discussion. I can say that personally. This real truth we see in this story is that we're all lost. The elder son was equally as lost, and perhaps more so. In fact, it was his morality that was contributing to how lost he actually was. It was the fact that he was doing the right thing that ultimately caused him to do and become the wrong person. For the younger son, we get a bit of an ending. However, we don't hear an ending for the elder son. What we do know from the story is that every one of us has a chance to walk away from self-righteousness, anger, resentment, entitlement, and a feeling of somehow we're justified because of who we are and what we've done. The sad news of this story is that for many of us to realize that we have a tendency to look down our nose. If you're often inclined to feel angry, entitled, you've embodied the role of the elder brother. For many of our seed guests, they may often see us as staff as the elder brother. As we know, many of our guests sincerely appreciate the work here at the Mustard Seed, and they find the community to be helpful and quite attractive. However, after a while in our company, they may feel they wouldn't fit into our quote-unquote Christian family, nor the life of faith, even if they find our community quite compelling. They can't see themselves maybe living up to the standard of church people, wearing the right clothing, using the right words, or perhaps even living the right place. For some of our guests, they smell the fragrance of the older brother. At a macro level, do you wonder if over the years, Mustard Seed as an organization has become more effective in our business, but may look to some more and more like the older brother? What about you? Do you personally feel like the elder son? Do you feel like you have to earn God's love? Do you have bitter feelings between you and a coworker, maybe a family member, a neighbor, because you feel you deserve better than you do? Let me tell you about an older brother that I know. He came from what many might consider to be a pretty typical Christian family. He attended church very regularly, even twice on Sundays. He faithfully attended youth group as well as weekly Youth for Christ activities. During his teens, he got fairly serious about his faith. He got baptized. He lived a fairly straight and narrow lifestyle. Essentially, you've heard it. He said he didn't drink, chew, or go with girls that do. At 16, he got baptized, and he later decided to go to Bible college after finishing high school. He became very involved in college, got pretty good marks, and in his graduating year became student body vice president. But during his senior year, things changed back home. 7 hours away, his parents' marriage became undone. Some of you can relate. It wasn't pretty, especially coming from a quote-unquote Christian home. After graduating, he moved a couple provinces over to go to Calgary to work with young offenders and close to his girlfriend. But within a few months after, his girlfriend dumped him and she went to Europe. He was alone in Calgary, decided to move to BC to continue his studies at university. Then something remarkable happened. Over the next 12 months, his parents started to see a Christian counselor, individually put God at the center of their lives, and they experienced what he referred to as a marriage miracle. Over the year, they each had a painfully profound encounter with God, then with each other. They reconciled with God, forgave each other, fell head over heels in love with each other. In fact, more in love than they'd ever been before. He was absolutely blown away by what God had done in their lives and his family. But that was short-lived. Within 18 months of these new lovebirds starting a new life together, his father suddenly developed lung cancer. Within 6 months, he passed away at the age of 56. Within another 6 months, his father, his mom's dad, passed away. His mom entered into deep depression, pleaded to have him move back home. So at age 28, he quit his job, moved home to clean up his father's business. By this time, most of his friends had entered their professional careers, were married, had begun having children. So he asked himself, how did I come to deserve this? I've been incredibly faithful to God over the years, and in turn he gives me a double dose of death, and I lose my job. He moves 3 provinces back to live with his mother, to clean up the mess of his business and that his father had left behind. It just didn't make sense to him. Then resentment, jealousy, and depression set in. He became the elder son in the parable. And using similar words which the elder son attacks the father, he became self-righteous, self-pitying, and jealous. And he harbored a deeper complaint. It was the complaint that comes from a heart that feels as if it never received what was due. Joy disappeared, and despair took root. This person, you guessed it, this figurative elder son was me. I know what it's like to judge the Father, to tell God what's fair and what's not fair. I felt hard done by, and my propensity to do right became my weakness. I became so proud that in doing the right thing, I quietly became arrogant, prideful, dare I say, even religious. Thankfully, I had another encounter with God, several in fact, that helped me see my father for the gracious and merciful God that he is. As for the parable, it doesn't tell us about the elder son's final willingness to let himself be found. Is the elder son willing to confess that he too is a sinner in need of forgiveness? Is he willing to acknowledge that he's not better than his brother? We're left alone with these questions, just as we do not know how the younger son accepted the celebration or how he lived with his father after his return. We also don't know whether or not the elder son ever reconciled himself with his brother, his father, or even himself. What I do know with unwavering certainty is the heart of the Father. It's a heart of limitless mercy. The good news here is that there are so many places in our lives where we are living like the Father already. The beauty of the story is the Father is all loving and is all forgiving. That's his job. Yes, he owns many fields and vineyards, but his principal task and joy in life is to love his children. With his two sons, whom he loves equally, it's his responsibility to teach them to become like the Father. For that's what we all must become in time if we were to fulfill the Father's purpose in our lives. As Father, he's always embodying love and pursuing both of his sons, not just one, pursuing both of his sons, chasing one out into the road and leaving the party to pursue the other. He's willing to meet them in their place of brokenness. And as God has met us there, he's also making us more just like him. The challenge I leave with you is to look at your own lives and figure out, what does it look like to engage in this prophetic act of love? Love and forgiveness have the power to truly change the world. Forgiveness might be the most divine thing that we have the opportunity to participate in. When I talk about forgiveness, I'm not talking about those we think deserve it. There are people who have sinned against us, people you are angry with right now that haven't asked for your forgiveness. In fact, I'm sure they've harmed you in some very real ways. And they may not technically deserve your forgiveness, but we didn't deserve the forgiveness of the Father either. The younger son, nor the elder son, but he gave it anyway. My prayer is that you will become more like the Father. You're going to forgive some folks, and in forgiving them, you're going to radically change their lives. You're going to reach out, you're going to love them. Some of these folks are going to be strangers. Some are going to be people that you live with, and some of them are going to be people that you work with right here at the Seed. In loving them, you'll radically reorient their lives. You'll tell the story of the kind of Christianity that all of us really get excited about. The kind that sees God not as an angry God, but as a loving God, who loves and forgives, even when we don't deserve it. I pray that all of us here at the Seed will live, love, and forgive, just like the Father. So will you join me as I look forward to the day when at last I see my Father run to me, singing, "Oh, my child, come on home to me, and I will hold you in my arms, and joyful be. There will always, always be a place for you at my table. Return to me, my child." Let's pray. Father, thank you for your powerful word, which shows us who you are and your loving character, and it also shows us who we are in need of you. Father, we thank you for your love, which fills us and gives us the forgiveness that we all crave with you and with each other. Father, I pray for each person here today as we serve you, that we would be like you as a loving Father, forgiving and loving ever deeply. In Christ's name we pray. Amen.